Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You know what's great about your investment account with the big guys? It's actually a time machine. Log in and zoom. Welcome back to 1999. It's time for an upgrade. At Public.com, you can invest in almost everything. Stocks, bonds, options, and more. You could even put your cash to work at an industry-leading 4.1% APY. Leave your clunky, outdated platform behind at Public.com. Go to Public.com and fund your account in 5 minutes or less. Paid for by Public Investing Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Full disclosures at Public.com/disclosures.
We've all done it. You see a headline but don't have time to read the whole story, or there's so much news you're not sure what is worth your time. I'm Colby Ickowitz, co-host of Post Reports, the weekday afternoon podcast from The Washington Post. Post Reports brings you what's relevant and revealing. Breaking stories, politics, wellness, culture. Each episode goes beyond a headline for the context you need. Find Post Reports now, wherever you're listening.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
KFI AM 640. It's Later with Mo Kelly as we continue our coverage of what's happening downtown with the protests in the wake of the immigration raids earlier today. Michael Bunks is back with us as something seems to be happening right now. Michael, what do you see?
I'm seeing another group of police officers that have lined up and have made their way down Temple Street in the direction away from City Hall towards Alameda Street. So now we're kind of surrounded by police officers, and I'm seeing some movement here. They're saying to push back. They're saying to push back, and there's basically we're in the middle of two lines of police officers. One of these lines right now, as we speak, has just grouped up into a huddle. So what their next move is, I'm not sure. Who they're targeting, I don't know. It might be the group that I'm kind of standing in. Can you back off, please? Thank you. I'm just a fan. We have noise from the police that are saying you need to get out of here. And folks have not heeded those words. I just saw the less lethal ammo aimed again, not fired, but aimed again in a threatening way that, like we talked about moments ago, they meant what they said. We just haven't been clear on when they were going to act on what they said, which was, we're going to get you out of here. We're going to take you to jail. A little bit more screaming now from some of the protesters who were in the middle of the police line on Alameda Street, and a little more movement from the police that grouped together, this new group of police officers that were coming down Temple Street. And now it looks like they're spreading back out, and I'm monitoring. I don't know police tactics well. I don't know what the plan is here, but there is clearly some plan that is taking shape. Okay, we've got movement now. Here go the original skirmish line in the middle of the intersection of Alameda and Temple Street, and they are arresting folks in the middle. I'm seeing physical contact, pushing of protesters now physically out of the street. From the original line, a little bit of shouting, a little bit of chirping from the protest side. The police have now moved closer to them. Now the skirmish line has stopped in the middle of the intersection, and they are closer to the protesters than they were before, even after that push of at least one of them. And the new group of police officers that were coming down Temple Street appear to be back in their cruisers. So I'm watching them to see what their move might be. Meanwhile, there's another line of cops that's preventing any of us from crossing into Alameda Street. Okay, now, more movement from the skirmish line. They are pushing the protesters out of the intersection to the other side of Alameda Street, closer to Union Station. And right now, it's just movement. Police walking forward, protesters walking backwards. No physical altercations yet, just a little bit of jawing. Nothing too serious looking at this point. But as we know, The tensions are high in this city tonight after the arrest of dozens of suspected illegal immigrants across LA.
Michael, I get the sense that since I can identify and hear individual voices, that there are more police officers than protesters in plain view. Is that correct?
It's pretty comparable. Pretty comparable. Now, these new cruisers that came down Temple Street, where I saw that group of police officers huddled, then returned to their cruisers, they are now driving into the intersection. They are turning right on Alameda towards Union Station. So what their next move is, I'm not sure.
When you are...
But they have just all, in a parade, made a right turn together.
Uh-huh. Okay. Is there, the police are moving forward. Are they encountering any resistance at this point?
Only light resistance. There was a pretty strong push of one guy in the early movement, and then after that, it was a light, delicate dance across the street. So now this skirmish circle, if you will, across the intersection is larger, as one group of protesters has been pushed farther back down Temple Street on the other side of the stoplights where the Alameda Street sign hangs.
Do you know at this point whether there have been any other announcements as far as on the public address system? Of course, they were giving out warnings, but are they speaking to the protesters now as far as specific instructions?
I haven't heard any in several minutes. The last were repeated warnings that you've been warned to leave, we will arrest you all. Along those lines. Again, an unlawful assembly has been declared. That does have, some punitive... Okay, police running. Police are now running up Temple Street. This must be the group that got out of their cruisers. They've moved their cruisers out of the street, and now they're returning up Temple Street. Again, I don't know police tactics, but they have some plan here. This is the new group that showed up moments ago. So we still have the skirmish circle encircling the intersection of Alameda and Temple Streets. And this new group, just after driving past us in one direction, has run past us in the opposite direction. They're heading up Temple Street in the direction of City Hall right now. Meanwhile, the skirmish circle remains still.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You know what's great about your investment account with the big guys? It's actually a time machine. Log in and zoom. Welcome back to 1999. It's time for an upgrade. At Public.com, you can invest in almost everything. Stocks, bonds, options, and more. You could even put your cash to work at an industry-leading 4.1% APY. Leave your clunky, outdated platform behind at Public.com. Go to Public.com and fund your account in 5 minutes or less. Paid for by Public Investing Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Full disclosures at Public.com/disclosures.
We've all done it. You see a headline but don't have time to read the whole story, or there's so much news you're not sure what is worth your time. I'm Colby Ickowitz, co-host of Post Reports, the weekday afternoon podcast from The Washington Post. Post Reports brings you what's relevant and revealing. Breaking stories, politics, wellness, culture. Each episode goes beyond a headline for the context you need. Find Post Reports now, wherever you're listening.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
As I hear a helicopter in the background, I hear sirens in the background. You said there was a second line of police, which I guess merged into the first line, if I understand you correctly. Are there more officers overall coming to the scene?
That's what I think we saw, was a group of police, if it's the same group, come in their cruisers, about 12 different cruisers that pulled up on the skirmish circle, and they stopped in the middle of Temple Street. They got out, they formed a line, then they formed a huddle, then they got back in their cruisers, then those cruisers were moved over to Alameda Street, and then from the direction where those cars went, I just saw 8 to 12 officers jog past us together. So they are now headed back up Temple Street, And what their plan is to deal with the crowd here, that remains to be seen. But, you know, they're not making it up as they go along. They have a plan. I don't know what it is, but I have a feeling I'm going to watch it unfold.
Has there been any specific aggression that you've seen from protesters? And again, I revert back to what we saw with UCLA, where there were protesters throwing water bottles, they were throwing rocks, they were throwing objects. Do you see any of this now, or is it just yelling at officers?
It's mostly just jawing, chirping, not a lot of physical altercations, people walking in the wrong direction. A guy right now just kind of being redirected. He's holding a Mexican flag just to show how many different issues have merged here in today's protest. It looks like one of the protesters' vehicles has been granted permission to leave the scene, and that also is covered in Palestine messaging, even though the protest was triggered by anti-ICE sentiment. So I don't know if some people have agreed to leave finally, now that it looks really, really, really serious. But one protester's vehicle that was pretty well dressed up with Palestine paraphernalia and the watermelon symbol that has become related to that movement, that has just been given permission to leave the scene, it looks like. So that may be the last chance for folks.
If I'm reading you right, there is I'll say a merging of issues where you have people who might have been out there for other protests, like the Palestine protests, who are out there now, arguably with nothing to do with the immigration portion of this.
I think, Mo, and maybe this is the cynic in me that has grown as I've grown older. Some people just like to protest. And
you're not wrong.
Regardless of what the issue is, here in LA, there's been a lot of things that people have been fired up about that have had large, massive protests. And it's often a lot of the same characters. Now, look, this may be able to be boxed into a simple political ideology that, yeah, if you feel this way about that, you're going to feel the same way about this issue over here. And you may be able, in some academic way, explain the connection of the plight of Palestinians and the plight of illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. And I'm sure it would be an interesting talk. But this protest started today because dozens of people were arrested in suspected illegal immigration raids by a federal agency. This is not about Israel and Palestine.
Usually when you go out to cover events like this, law enforcement or the agency involved, if it's fire department, they will let you and other reporters know if there's going to be a media gathering where they'll give you an update on a situation. Has there been any type of interaction with media by either federal agencies or local law enforcement?
Not at this point, and no gaggle or anything like that, but that was also true at UCLA when they had to disperse the crowd. It's not like they offered any media availability. You talked to your sources as best you could to get an idea on what was going to happen, but they are so into the actual tactical nature of what they're going to do that they're not going to talk to us about it yet. This isn't like a house fire. This isn't like a crime scene after the fact. We are in the middle of something that is happening right now, so there really wouldn't be a place to do it.
From what you can see, how wide of a perimeter? Yes, they've blocked off this particular intersection where you're at, but I'm quite sure it extends out beyond where you are.
It is a pretty large intersection here, Alameda and Temple Street, two major downtown streets. And right now, it's pretty well surrounded. So I would say about 300 feet in diameter. But again, it's just quiet except for that, that helicopter up above that's still shining its lights down, and maybe a little bit of chirping from protesters and maybe a little bit from police, but otherwise not a lot of activity. Again, this scene has looked like it was going to end in some fashion for a few hours, actually. I mean, once all the violent stuff peaked, it looked like everyone was going to go home, but that just hasn't been the case. And so now we're all just kind of lingering here, waiting for something to happen.
From what you describe, it sounds like we're not in a period at this moment, and that could change obviously with one rock throw, but there's no seeming movement towards escalation by protesters. At least we know that law enforcement, LAPD, is moving forward trying to make sure that people who are on scene, who may be protesters, they may be just instigators, but whoever's out who's not supposed to be there, they're going home. But there's not an escalation at this point. Is that fair?
Yeah, not a lot of serious antagonizing going on. There's some obvious resentment here, but nothing like we saw earlier. Again, to go back to the Palestine campus protest from last year, when that really hit the fan at UCLA, when the encampment was encroached upon by the police, when they finally decided they needed to go in there to bust it up, it all happened very suddenly. It was a long standoff like this, and then suddenly a little bit of movement, like we saw, this group of police that showed up here on Temple Street and then went one way in their cars and came back another way on foot. Mm-hmm. You saw little things like that happening on UCLA's campus last year, and then bang, the big event took place, and it was just hell for a couple of hours while that thing worked itself out.
I ask you this question.
This is not as big. This is nowhere near as big as that. This seems to be a relatively small crowd. They just happen to be in a pretty significant intersection, and the police need to finish it, or feel they need to finish it.
I asked you this question when I talked to you, I don't know, maybe 3 segments ago, so it may run together, but I think the situation may have changed. Since we're not in a period of escalation at this moment, is there a discernible difference in the posture of LAPD? Yes, they're moving forward, but does it seem like it's more aggressive or more casual as they move forward and clear out that space?
This group of officers seems to have the instructions at this point to hold a line. And that's basically what they're doing. So they're not letting anybody go past. They're not letting anybody take a wrong turn. There are no cars coming through, and no pedestrians can go to the other side of the street. So whichever side you're on, that's where we're stuck right now. Some protesters are on one side of Alameda. Others are on the other side. And that's basically it. But it's not like a strong posture. There's not a lot of puffed chest right now, but they are holding those less lethal firearms. And the folks who have been protesting are at a relatively healthy distance right now. But again, they've been ordered to go home, and they haven't. And that's what the police are waiting for. That's what we're waiting for. How does this end?
I ask you this because you have a very particular vantage point, and I also gauge the perception of it by amount of media there. Are you the only person who's able to cover this just because of your proximity, or have there been other news and radio outlets who've managed to get there? How is it being covered?
I see a couple of our friends from TV. I see their vans. I don't know where the reporters are stationed or from where they're broadcasting. This is also the type of event that brings out a lot of the live streamers that you might run into on TikTok or Twitter. So you've got a lot of those live streams going. Those tend to be activist and biased in nature, maybe more so than any of us in the media, but that's going on. So there's a lot of live streams. In fact, I was watching a live stream before I decided to come down because I tried to get a feel for whether we needed to be here, and it was just a little unclear because, like I said, this thing looked like it was going to be over. But these can turn on a dime. I happen to live downtown, so it was easy to get over here and park in the secret spot at City Hall and walk to the scene. I got to tell you, there are fewer people here now than there were when we started talking, though. So I think this thing is definitely close to its conclusion. It's just, what will the nature of that conclusion be? That's the question. Tensions were so high today. People are rightfully concerned about how this plays out.
Am I right to, as we keep making these comparisons to the pro-Palestine protests on the various campuses, USC, UCLA, am I right to make the assumption that at the minimum there have been fewer outside agitators who have come into this situation, at least as of yet?
Oh, yeah. Now, there did appear to be some looky-loos that showed up to see what was going on. But I think when it looked like the police were going to be making their move moments ago, they left. Because you can get caught up in these things. And I'll tell you, on the campus protest last year, even as a media member holding, my device, my microphone, my media badge, and my KFI jacket, they weren't making any exceptions for us. You needed to get out of the way. And so the flashbangs were very close. The riot shields were very close, and I was in the way as much as any of those protesters at that point. So I think these were curious people who at least had enough wisdom to know that it was probably time to go, lest they be caught up in something much worse.
Well, I was going to ask you about your physical safety, but you addressed that in that answer right there. I am glad that you're safe, and I'm glad that you are able to be there and give us a firsthand account of what is happening as it happens. Michael Monks, thank you for all that you're doing, and hopefully this will be the end of the story, at least for the rest of the night, so you can get some sort of rest.
What kind of workers' comp do we have if I get hit with a rubber bullet?
None. So don't even.
Okay.
Try to avoid getting shot.
I'm not going to try to pull that scam.
Actually, you need to talk to Mark Ronner, who was shot with a rubber bullet. So
multiple times. They smart. I can tell you that. You don't want that.
Was that a domestic dispute, or was that out on the scene or something?
I think that was during the WTO riots quite a number of years ago, and I can still feel it.
Yeah, the Momigos are saying that Monk should get a good lawyer just in case he gets hit.
Yeah, don't get shot, Mike.
I'll do my best. That's my goal every day in downtown LA, actually.
Be safe out there, my friend.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You know what's great about your investment account with the big guys? It's actually a time machine. Log in and zoom. Welcome back to 1999. It's time for an upgrade. At Public.com, you can invest in almost everything. Stocks, bonds, options, and more. You can even put your cash to work at an industry-leading 4.1% APY. Leave your clunky, outdated platform behind at Public.com. Go to Public.com and fund your account in 5 minutes or less. Paid for by Public Investing Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Full disclosures at Public.com/disclosures.
There's an efficient way to get caught up on a lot of news. It's called The Seven from The Washington Post. It's a newsletter and podcast. Whether you're reading or hit play, you get 7 stories you need to know, and you can consume it all in just a few minutes. The Seven is out every weekday morning by 7 a.m. Eastern. I'm Hannah Jewell. I'm one of the writers, and I host the show. Find The Seven podcast wherever you're listening. The newsletter link is waiting for you in the show notes.
All right, bud.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
KFI AM 640, Mo Kelly here as we continue to follow the events of what happened earlier today in downtown Los Angeles with the ICE immigration raids. We reported earlier that some 45 people were arrested. And I want to always remind people when I say arrested, there are levels of detainment which are not made clear, whether they were arrested for immigration violations, whether they arrested for obstruction, were they more arrested administratively, detained, and later released. That information, we don't know the specifics of who was arrested for what reasons or why. We'll probably know that in the coming days. But also something else we'll know in the coming days, whether this was a single day event or whether it will be throughout the whole weekend. You may have heard I started off the show tonight talking about my final thought from last night, where I was indicating that these ICE raids specifically were coming because it was explained in an intra-office email that the expectation was that ICE arrests were to increase this weekend specifically. That information had been reported publicly, and I passed it on to you and talked about what was going to be the result of that in the coming days and weeks. And now it has officially begun. In LA, at least, in downtown LA. We don't know whether it's going to continue tomorrow. I suspect it will because the email from ICE, the internal communications, suggested that this was going to be all weekend long. It doesn't mean it's always, I should say, it's only going to be in LA, but it's going to be different parts of the country, inclusive of LA, and it will probably be all over the weekend. Now, when I was speaking to Michael Monks, who did a fantastic job of reporting on scene downtown, I was asking him whether there should have been some thought, and I know he couldn't give me his opinion, but I was musing out loud whether there should have been some consideration as to not doing this on a Friday, if only because we know that this was going to lead to some sort of community response. And when you have a community response, be it in the form of protests or just expressions of frustration and anger toward law enforcement or whoever happens to be downtown, you probably would want to avoid doing it, these types of raids on Friday if you're worried about protests, if only because you have people who most likely do not have to go to work the next day, who have a little bit more free time. It's a Friday night, so you have people who also may even be under the influence. It depends on how they learned about the information, when they learned about the information, whether it impacts them personally, if there was someone that they know personally who was detained or arrested. All those factors oftentimes shape the response that we're seeing right now. The good news is it has not escalated to the point where there have been a number of violent clashes in between protesters and police. When we last spoke to Michael Monks a few moments ago, he was giving us the impression that it was de-escalating, although law enforcement, LAPD specifically, was moving forward and following through on their threats of dispersing people. There was an order, dispersal order, which was given, I want to say, maybe in the 7:00 hour, if I'm not mistaken. But since then, it is not markedly escalated. That's the good news. And hopefully it will stay that way the rest of the evening. Now, if we use the past as some sort of guide or comparison point, when we talked about the various pro-Palestinian protests, those ebbed and flowed from day to day. Friday might have been one thing, but Saturday, the next day, might have been another thing. In other words, the question is whether what we saw today will continue into the weekend, whether it will continue Saturday night or whether the initial anger will subside if there are no more immigration raids tomorrow. And I think that is going to be the key indicator. If we see more raids, I'm only talking about Los Angeles. If we see more raids tomorrow, then we can reasonably assume we will see more protests tomorrow. The response will be the same. If we don't see immigration raids tomorrow, or if we don't see them in Los Angeles, maybe they're in another city, then the response may be different. But I think it's fair to assume, and this is an assumption, if there are more raids tomorrow, then we will probably see some sort of response from citizenry tomorrow. Now, how that will actually present itself, there's no way to know. But since we are on a weekend, you're more likely to have people who will be out there because they have more time available to participate in situations like these. And so this is why we always ask you to just keep it here on KFI, because we will have the KFI 24-hour newsroom continue to follow this, even though it may not be a specific wall-to-wall coverage like we have right now. But of course, you'll have Mark Ronner, you'll have other news voices throughout the weekend. We still have Michael Monks, who is on site, on scene, if in the event it should turn in the other direction and it seems like it's going to escalate once again. Not that anyone wants that, but we know that it's a possibility. It could be the actions of a singular individual. It could be an agitator who has nothing to do with any of this, not connected to any of this, who feels the need, he or she, to involve themselves in this. And it could turn everything in a completely different direction. I'm quite sure there will be statements by city officials and state officials who will be weighing in on this, and that will probably give us some sort of sense of how the city of Los Angeles is going to respond, if at all, or the state of California. I assume Governor Newsom will have something to say. We know that Mayor Bass had released a statement. We know that LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell had released a statement, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, that LA is a sanctuary city, and LAPD since 1979 has not directly involved itself in the issues of federal law or immigration enforcement. somewhat similar to that, you had L.A. Sheriff's Department Sheriff Robert Luna say that the Sheriff's Department will take a similar stance and not directly involve itself in the enforcement of immigration. In other words, they're not going to be stopping people with the express intent of determining someone's immigration status, but they will be very much directly involved in keeping people in Southern California safe and not have protests like these escalate to a point where it endangers the general public. We'll have more in just a moment.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
It's Mo Kelly as we continue our live coverage of the events downtown as protests have taken over a certain area of downtown in response to the immigration raids which took place earlier today. And we've been following them mostly with the help of Michael Monks, who's been on scene, and he's going to join us one more time to give us the latest. Michael, tell us, as I've asked you before, what you see and what you hear.
Well, the scene where I was at we've got absolute movement right now, but every time I see this movement, and by movement I mean police officers running, it turns out not to be a whole lot. I have moved a block closer towards Union Station. I'm now at 1st and Alameda Streets, outside of the Little Tokyo Arts District Metro Station. That's one of the new metro stations, and that's where all of the police have relocated. The original spot where I was seems to have cleared up, but now the police are standing here in a skirmish circle, definitely standing at the ready in case stuff goes down. I've seen a little chippiness, I've seen a little jawing, but nothing like the violence we saw earlier today. In fact, I don't even know what these police are watching right now. It's hard to get a good vantage point on where the folks are. So, that's a nice comment. Thanks, man. There's still some of us media guys. The police guys have us all surrounded. I still don't know if I'm going to get a rubber bullet to the butt at some point, but this thing looks over to me, and yet it's not. So who they're waiting on, what they're waiting on, it's really unclear. The last of the protesters that I could see kind of got into it with the police about 10 minutes ago, and now I can't see where they've run off to, but the LAPD helicopter is still hovering above, shining its light down, and the police are still standing here in a skirmish circle.
Michael, let me ask you, you said there was some violence that you saw earlier today. If you could tell, what time was that roughly that you're talking about this violence?
It was during the commute home, really. So after 5 o'clock is when some of these protesters descended on a federal building in downtown Los Angeles, got into a violent skirmish with police. Okay, wait a second. The police are now moving towards... They're telling us to stay back. But the police are moving towards the Arts District. And I'm going to follow the media here. Travel in a pack and see what happens. They don't yell at us. Okay, police are moving. They've let us go past, so I'm kind of following a TV camera. They let me go past here.
Don't get shot in the butt.
Yeah, I know. I don't want it, man. So I'm at the top part of the metro station here, and it does look like there are a few protesters left. Police have, but again, I don't know what they're doing. I'm not a police tactician, so it's hard to know why there's this quick bolt of action from the cops and then nothing. So, and really, again, the crowd is nothing like it was earlier. It's barely 24 people from this vantage point. I don't know what I'm missing, Mo.
I don't think you're missing anything. We just want to make sure that we're covering it in the event that something happened, as opposed to what happened 5 hours ago.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And if these are just antagonizers who are just looking to get into a little jawing match, then, this seems to be quite a large production to respond to that. This looks small enough to be wrapped up fairly easily, especially with the number of police that are still here.
Then how about this, Michael Monks? You get yourself out of harm's way, because we don't want you mistaken as a protester. We don't want you.
That's not going to happen. Not with my blue glasses and my KFI hoodie. They're going to know I'm a narc.
You can end up like Mark Ronner, and we do not want that to happen.
No, I don't want to wound that I carry with me well into adulthood.
Well, I'll let you go, Michael, just so be safe the rest of the evening. It seems like everything is under control at this point, and I can say have a safe end to your evening tonight.
Hey, you do the same, Mo. Thanks for the chat.
Sure. And before we get out of here, we'll read you a statement from Mayor Karen Bass and some other political officials from earlier today. Mayor Karen Bass posted a statement saying, quote, "This morning we received reports of federal immigration enforcement actions in multiple locations in Los Angeles. As mayor of a proud city of immigrants who contribute to our city in so many ways, I am deeply angered by what has taken place. These tactics sow terror in our communities and disrupt basic principles of safety in our city. My office is in close coordination with immigrant rights community organizations. We will not stand for this." And also, California Senator Adam Schiff had this to say. He called the raids, quote, "unconscionable." And he went on, "Today's detention of and injury to David Huerta, president of SEIU SSW, and a U.S. citizen, while acting as a community observer during an immigration raid in L.A. is another terrible example. This is part of a larger campaign of intimidation by the White House, and it must end," close quote. L.A. County Supervisor Hilda Solis also said that the raids were, quote unquote, deeply disturbing, and saying that ICE agents targeted some of the most vulnerable residents of L.A. She went on, "The individuals detained are hardworking Angelenos who contribute to our local economy and labor force every day. Los Angeles County remains committed to standing with our immigrant communities, providing support through our Office of Immigrant Affairs and our network of nonprofit partners." And that's just a brief survey of some of our elected officials, both city and county, are monitoring and responding to this. I'm quite sure there will be more tomorrow. We'll find out more about the raids themselves and also what is going to be the city and county response. I'm Mo Kelly. This is KFI AM 640. We're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app.
KFI and KOST HD2, Los Angeles, Orange County. More stimulating talk.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
And here we have a specimen from the early 2000s, a legacy investing platform. Please don't touch the exhibit, folks. It could crash.
Ready to step out of the financial history museum? At Public.com, you can invest in almost everything. Stocks, bonds, options, and more. You could even put your cash to work at an industry-leading 4.1% APY. Leave your clunky, outdated platform behind. Go to Public.com and fund your account in 5 minutes or less. Paid for by Public Investing Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Full disclosures at Public.com/disclosures.
There's an efficient way to get caught up on a lot of news. It's called The 7 from The Washington Post. It's a newsletter and podcast. Whether you're reading or hit play, you get 7 stories you need to know, and you can consume it all in just a few minutes. The 7 is out every weekday morning by 7 a.m. Eastern. I'm Hannah Jewell. I'm one of the writers, and I host the show. Find The 7 podcast wherever you're listening. The newsletter link is waiting for you in the show notes.